Let's check, there you go. You're on camera.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Good evening. Welcome to the Skokie 68 School Board meeting for February 20th, 2025. Can I get a roll call, please?
Jordan? Hyatt?
Yes.
Lonergan?
Yes.
Ruffner?
Yes.
Sturbins?
Yes.
Sullivan?
Yes.
Warshaw?
We will now open our meeting for public comment. Do we have any registered?
No, we do not.
Do we have anyone going once? All right, moving on to our superintendent's reports.
Our first item of business is the Old Orchard Junior High highlights. Mr. Hanson regrets that he cannot be with us this evening. However, he has sent the trusty Mr. Zika and Ms. Otto to help us learn more about Avid. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ferial Ado. I'm one of the assistant principal at the junior high, and I have with me.
Garrett Zyka, I teach Avid and also 6th grade science.
All right. Today we are going to share with you our first phase of implementing Avid program at the junior high. This presentation aligns with two goals of the strategic planning goals. Social emotional learning and the whole child. In particular, in this presentation, we're looking, focusing on empowering students to advocate for themselves, and we working on developing strategies to help students for their structural and academic and behavior goals. The second goal is the teaching and learning. We're trying to implement best practices, research-based, to empower our teachers to increase the level of rigor and meeting the diverse needs of our students. This is us, the Avid Side team. This year we started with a core committee. Myself, Mr. Zyka, and the instructional support team. This group of individuals meet once a month to discuss and plan and prioritize best practices to implement as a school-wide. This is a growing committee. We now have subcommittee members. More teachers are getting trained into the Avid program to learn more about these best practices and prepare kids for career and college readiness.
Avid's mission that we're bringing to Old Orchard is to close the opportunity gap by preparing students not only for college, but also career, if they go that route, and we just want them to have overall success in the global society. Avid is broken into 4 domains. We have instruction, systems, culture, and leadership. So instruction is what we're going to see in the classroom and how we deliver our instruction. The systems is not only how the school operates, but also, some of the interconnectedness between the staff and the programs and the things that we do. The culture of the school, both with the students and the staff. Are we promoting that college and career readiness? Are we believing in our students reaching beyond high school? Do they believe in themselves? Are they reaching for those goals as well? And leadership, all of this being brought to us by Greg Hansen and kind of delivering that message that we can raise the bar and we can push these students to be college and career ready. So if you walk into Old Orchard, on any given day, you might see some of the systems being connected at our Monday meetings. So we see in the top left, this is one of our staff meetings where we're kind of talking about how to implement some of these Avid strategies. You can see our leadership there is kind of promoting that idea. Building a culture in the classroom where the students kind of feel connected, they feel that they can rely on one another, that they can support one another in their growth, and then kind of improving that instruction. This year we've really been focusing on note-taking and taking that in so they can develop their own questions as well.
We interviewed a few of our 6th graders and why they chose Avid and what's the benefit of being in an Avid elective. So this is 2 students of 6th grade.
Hello, what's your name?
Vanya.
Hi, Vanya. Eliza. I know you are both in Avid. Can you tell me a little bit why you like Avid and why you chose Avid?
I chose Avid because I wanted to get a scholarship and I know that it would help me with that and succeed more in my classes and help me learn about things that I don't understand.
Excellent.
For me, it's like things that I don't understand in like certain classes. Mr. Zeika or my Avid teacher will go over it and it will make more sense. Also, the note taking helps me go back if I forgot it.
So can you think of one skill with Avid that you become better at doing in your other classes? What is something that you feel like, yes, because of my Avid class, now I know how to do this skill?
Probably note taking because probably most of if I started the year I probably wouldn't start taking notes if it wasn't for Avid because I would not really be more engaged in that. But now that I'm taking notes I remember more that happened in that class.
Excellent, thank you for sharing.
I would do this. I was doing the same as her. Note taking really helped me because, like I said before, if I forgot something, I could go back. And if I want to go back from it to study more about it and know more about it, then I could just go back and study more.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for talking to me and keep up the great work. Go Avid, yay. Hello, what's your?
We also reached out to the 7th graders, and they've been in Avid a little bit longer, and we've kind of been pushing leadership on them. So we gave them the opportunity to develop their own questions. So 2 students sat down with their self-created questions, and they interviewed each other.
Okay, ask away. The first question is, what's going on in Avid? Basically, you summed it up. We were note taking on different subjects, and we help each other with things that we're confused with. Is this a boost in our classes? Does Avid actually help with the grades? Yeah, personally, it really helps.
That's as loud as we can make it.
Because I zone out a lot during my classes, and sometimes I just don't feel like doing tests and stuff like that. But having it written down for me really helps me because I know the stuff that we learn in class is going to forgot. How is Avid useful? Avid is useful because if you're stuck in a class, you can always rely on Avid to help you and to study with you. Is it easier to remember to get your Bible with you? When I first started in Avid, it wasn't easy. I did not want to read it at all. And then I started looking papers a lot. So then I tried out the Bible, and then it really helped me. What's the last question? What did Avid help you with the most? Avid helped me with note taking and being an organized person. And now I have better grades.
So she commented that they have better grades, and we looked at the iReady Fall data, and we put all the Avid students kind of looking at where do they individually score, what was their overall averages, and then I found a group of students that were not in Avid that scored very similarly, had the same average, and so we kind of used them as a comparison group. And when we looked at their growth in the winter, we expected if their percentile, if they had normal growth, they would stay on the same percentile, making those percentile growth, but even if they do make growth. But the instruction in Old Orchard, with these groups of the students, whether they were the ones that were not in Avid, they actually still went up a whole percentile growth, so they broke their trajectory and actually went above and beyond. But then we looked at the Avid students, and they went up over 3.6 percentile points, so they actually did triple the growth compared to the non-Avid students. So we can see that it really is making a difference for those that are getting this extra instruction. And the whole idea of Avid is to take what we do in this elective and make it school-wide. So our real growth is not to do this just for some students, but to do it for all students. So when Avid looks at how to approach a school and how do we improve our school, they have this framework, and it's all broken down into 2 parts. We have kind of what students do at the top, and then we have what educators do. So what students are going to be doing is doing some rigorous academic preparation, so that improving their study skills, really getting involved, asking those deep questions. We want them to have opportunity knowledge, what kind of community opportunities are there, what kind of opportunities are going to be there for things later on like scholarships, what kind of opportunities there are for investing and saving, for their college and their futures now, and then making them part of that. So having that student agency, having them take that leadership role, and having them step forward and take the steps that they need to.
And in order for all these things to happen, to empower our students, if we look at the second half of this triangle, what educators do. And educators try to focus on four main categories according to the AVID framework. They insist on rigor. And that's by providing educational experiences where all of our students feel challenged and engaged in order for them to increase complex level of understanding toward the concept. Educators try to break down the barriers, structural barriers, perceptual barriers, to make sure that we provide equitable access to all of our students to achieve the opportunity, knowledge that we are seeking to achieve for them, aligning the work by putting together our policies and beliefs and practices to fit all together into our district vision and end goal. And what educators do last but not least is advocating for our students and extend that social emotional learning and the academic and the behavior. These two components of what students need and what educators do, putting them together, and you see the yellow triangle here is the relational capacity, which means building this connection between teachers and their colleagues, students with their peers, and students with their teachers, based on trusted relationship and building this connection based on authenticity. So using this framework, how are we moving this into the life of the junior high? What we started doing, we have find success, we provide avid appetizers. And when you look at the term avid appetizer, this is used figuratively. So every staff meeting, we dedicate the first 15 to 20 minutes to a professional development. And this professional development, avid appetizers, now all of our staff members know when they walk into the staff meeting, they said, Ms. Otto, are we having an avid appetizer today? And it serves the purpose of engaging all of our staff members, regardless if they are teaching content areas, PE, Encore, all of us are getting into engagement of learning about the adults' learning and providing professional growth for our teachers, and most importantly, giving the data to make the data an ongoing things where we visit and look up our students, who's making progress, and how can we meet the diverse needs. And last but not least is providing them opportunity to reflect on their teaching practices and how they can refine the strategies. Here's the timeline of our AVID appetizers so far. We started by educating our staff about the AVID program and what it is and the philosophy. Then we moved in towards building the relational capacity with strengthening the relationship between staff and students with their peers. What is rigor? We try to build a common understanding of what is rigor and what is not rigorous in order for us to all have a common goal. CASTA's level of thinking or CASTA's level of questionings is another strategy to increase the curiosity and the inquiry-based learning for our students. And right now we are focusing on wicker strategies and how can we implement writing, inquiry, collaboration, organization, and readings into our PLCs and helping our PLCs developing SMART goals to move forward with these practices.
So one of the things that she just mentioned was Constance's level of thinking or questioning, and this is basically the normal pathway that we take in learning. So when we're learning anything new, we start by just kind of gathering basic information, kind of understanding the who, what, where, why, when. This is the kind of information that comes directly from the text. We can kind of point to the answers from our source and just have a basic understanding. But from there, we want our students to then, keep raising that bar. So once they have a basic understanding of what they're looking at, we want them to start processing it. So these kind of questions might be like, what are the similarities and differences? Forcing them to compare and contrast two different ideas. To take what they took from the text and then compare that to their own personal experience. So they're getting a little bit from the page, but a little bit off the page. And then finally, you want to hit those deeper level questions like how can we apply this in today's society? How about tomorrow's society? How would this change, or what effects might it happen if? So we kind of give them these novel and creative situations where they can take what they learned and take what they've experienced in their life and kind of create new ideas.
So we would like for us to engage into this 3 minutes or less activity. Think of the Costa's level of thinking, just asking questions. We're not answering the questions. We want to increase the level of curiosity. So here's a photo of our one and only Old Orchard Junior High. And on the right, you see the traffic light. Think of the first level of questioning, the gathering, as the green, where you go and find information. Sometimes the answer is a yes or no. The answer is right there in the photo for you. Mostly for the kids, it's right there in the text that they are reading. The second level of Costa's level of thinking is the processing. Think of it as the yellow, where you need to slow down a little bit to activate your prior knowledge, to see what can you think of. The answer is in the text or in the photo, but you need more information activating your schema. And the last level of question is the application piece, where the answer is not in the text or in the photo, where you're finding the new learning and asking higher order level of thinking. So we would like for you to write just one question. So this group of wonderful members, think of the first question, the green. Look at the photo. What's the first thing that comes to your mind asking a level 1 question? This side from Zoraida to Dr. Jordan. The second question, the yellow, think of a level 2 question about the photo. And this side, the stop and think. You can turn and talk to your elbow partner. You can have 2 minutes.
And so, yeah, level 1, you should be able to answer the question using only the photo. Level 2 might use some information from the photo, but also something that's not included. And then if you're writing a level 3 question at the highest level, you're kind of thinking about this metaphorically, or what this represents, and kind of stepping away from the photo.
Yes, symbolic meaning. And you have the house in front of you, which is from Avid, with all the words from questioning.
This is the 4 of us?
The 4 of us.
My thought is around inference
Mhm.
and flag that happens from that. A viewer can infer what the viewer is taking
Yes.
recent events in the United States as relates to
What do you think about the
It ended at the, like, second January 31st or something.
I hear you guys.
Yeah,
Raising the,
yes.
raising the
I
bar.
see the bar right
I
there.
was looking at those notes and how many
Yeah.
So you would be asking, what was the word you used?
based on the height of the flag, can you infer?
Yeah, that's what I was.
When this one, or based on, maybe we don't wait, but it's based on
What is that?
the clues from these
Two layers to be.
You can't quite tell.
Yeah.
The trees are
That's a flag.
You're choosing words from the.
Yes.
Yeah, the processing to infer as much of the.
Yeah, and with level 2, you're gonna do like a lot of just like comparing, contrasting, analyzing.
There we go. So that's the one. We don't have to mind these as a group.
Examine and interpret. Examine the photo.
A minute and a half.
And I think infer can be level 2 or 3. Yeah.
I realize it is.
Oh, is it both?
I think it depends on how you right go with it. Yeah.
Right, yeah, that's what I was saying. Really, as much information as they could glean from what
Without
they
that,
determine.
we can't be trusted with no kernel of 64.
Okay, are we ready? Give us thumbs up if you're ready to share. So we would like one person from each group.
Katrina will represent us.
We would like one person from each group to share with us your question.
Next time I'm thinking about.
Who would like to go first?
Start with level 1.
With level 1 question.
I'll tell you.
You wrote it down.
I actually wrote it as a sentence, not a question, so I completely failed. Where is the US symbol located in this picture?
Crushed it.
Level 2 question, the processing. Dr. Rodriguez.
So our question would be something like, can we infer from this photo the time of year?
Okay. What inference can you make based on this one? Alright. Thank you. Another question, was there another question?
No.
Okay, level 3. Level 3, this, level 3.
What would this school look like if we built it in 2025? We had a second one. What elements were architects thinking about when designing buildings in the 1970s?
There's a lot in there, there's a lot
That's very
packed in
good,
that
though.
second question.
That's tricky.
How we do?
So, that's basically one example of the learning experiences that we create for our students to ask you questions, to increase their curiosity and learning. Thank you so much for having us today, and if you have any questions, we're more than happy to answer. Thank you.
Any questions from the board?
I just have a quick question. It's more for 7th and 8th graders, and when you have 6th graders come in, you're scouting them out. Is that how it works?
We actually scouted them in 5th grade.
Um,
And we actually went over there and interviewed them. And so we picked them out primarily, starting by like who's in the like lower to mid scores for the iReady. And then we also looked for, are they motivated? Do they want to try to push themselves a little bit further? Looking for, teacher feedback on that. And so we found those students that want to do more, they just didn't know how.
Yeah, we conduct interviews one-on-one with the students, and we communicate with parents.
They have Avid also in high school too,
Yeah.
moving up, so if they need that
Absolutely.
support, they can.
That's why we started at the junior high, because of the connection with the students.
And I heard, I've heard more students that were going into the high school come back and say like, I joined the high school, and so, they're getting more excited about it, and I think that they really like what they're getting from it.
Yes.
And before I answer this question, I apologize because I was tardy and you might have already referred to this, but I'm just curious about this particular structure as it relates to Bloom's technology. And, there's some similarities, but
Yes.
this is way broader, which is what I really like about it. But, that's built on a trajectory. And this is built on a very distinct kind of scaffold versus a long scale. And I just wonder, does that figure it all in how you all approach this, or does Bloom's come in at all?
So when we introduce this, Costa is the psychologist who this is based off the Bloom's taxonomy.
Okay.
So he uses Bloom's taxonomy, the 6 levels, and combine the first 2 together to come up with the processing and all of that. So it's like a higher level of doing the same thing instead of having 6, condensing them into 3.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Absolutely.
And I think he kind of emphasizes that we go through all of them, as part of our learning process. And, to get to reach that level 3, we go through 1 and 2.
Thank you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
being
very
here.
much.
I will tell you, the Cornwall notes have even made their way, as you know, into some of the leadership meetings. So
Yeah.
it's spreading to adults as well.
Sparkles too,
Yeah.
right?
Well said. Thanks for being here.
Have a good night. Fantastic, thank you.
Up next, we have an update from our Township Trustee of Schools representative. It's a new position that was started this year within the township, Ms. Kenny Austin.
Yes, so House Bill 305 restructured the treasurer's office where school districts are now the trustees of the treasurer's office. So I'm the lucky pick for our school, along with all the other bigger schools in the area. So we had our first official meeting. These meetings take place at different locations of the feeder schools in the district. The meetings are gonna be held on a quarterly basis. so they'll be 4 times a year. This was our first one. We elected our president for the first time, and then we also accepted the resignation of the other trustees. The treasury report highlights, they spoke about the tax collection of all the schools. It was about 148.29 million. The assets was 576 million with a 4.7% yield, along with 30 million in new investments. We went over the investment analysis, and it brought in an interest of 2.31 million interest distributed through all school districts. And we reviewed the list of expenditures, credit card transaction, and financial statements. Everything was approved, and our next meeting is in the following quarter.
Sweet.
Just a couple other quick updates. 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to meet with 10 students at Old Orchard Junior High. It was a student focus group. It was part of my entry plan, seemingly a little late in February. But they gave really great insight. We had student makeup from all the different feeder schools, so it was really interesting to hear from our students' experience in the junior high and trickling back down to their experience in elementary school. Some trends emerged, a lot of real positivity, tons of praise for the staff and the supportiveness of the staff. One of the students used the phrase and statement ecosystem, which I thought was impressive, and said we have a really supportive ecosystem. I said, wow, that's great. They gave really good feedback as well around things to think about down the line, focused items around things like extracurriculars, and encouraged me to listen to team members and learn as much as I can in this first year. They were very encouraging, very polite, and very, very mature, so it was a great experience. We do have online currently an update to our website and our policy manual. For those of you that enjoy reading policy as much as I do, it's a nice searchable database, which makes it much easier for you to access the district policies as well as to reference those. So that's just a sign of things to come with future website upgrades, as we have that communication and engagement team starting next week with its first meeting, which was canceled prior due to the weather that we had last week or two. A couple of important dates. March 4th is the North Cook IASB division meeting. It's more of a board meeting related item. March 20th is our next March board meeting. March 21st is a teacher-student non-attendance day. March 24th is when spring recess begins. March 31st is honoring Eid. We have no students, no teachers that day. And then April 1st is when spring recess ends. So we return to school on April 1st. We have 24th off from there. I think those are all my updates. Any questions on anything I went over briefly? All right.
Good. Thank you for that searchable. I actually have a printed copy of it.
There you go. No longer needed.
Dear Lord.
Archive.
All right, the next item of business is the reading and acceptance of minutes. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes from January 16th, 2025 for the regular meeting and closed session meetings.
Second.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Loniger,
Yes.
Ruffner,
Yes.
Sturbins,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bell Jordan.
Consent agenda is our next item of business. The consent agenda includes the personnel report covering employee hire, leave of absence, resignation, retirement, and termination as posted with the agenda for this meeting. Financial reports, which includes fund balances for January 2025 and the statement of position report. Pay orders and expenditures, which includes accounts payable, statement of cash flow, and the P-card monthly report. Non-public facility placement Easter seals. Board of Education policy second reading. Does any board member wish to remove an item from this consent agenda? Hearing no, may I have a motion and a roll call vote to approve the consent agenda as presented?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented by the board president.
Second.
Loniger,
Yes.
Ruffner,
Yes.
Sturbins,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bell Jordan,
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
We'll move to our reports and discussion items, noting that we had omitted unintentionally the NTDSE report for this month, so we will hear that next month. Thank you, Noel. Mr. Strickland.
There was an EdRed group meeting earlier this month, and very timely. It was on responding or not responding to executive orders from the federal level related to education, specifically K through 12. It was a really interesting and thoughtful presentation, and I think regardless of your political leanings, it's an incredibly stressful time right now for school boards and school administrators because executive orders are coming rapidly and sometimes not without guidance to interpret them. We'll just put it that way. And so it was just a very nicely laid out presentation. They didn't even attempt to address individual executive orders, but it was more of just a model of how to process them, strong recommendation when appropriate to rely on counsel when interpreting what actions are and are not prescribed or mandated by those executive orders. So it was really nicely done, and I think that we will all need to refer back to it probably in the coming months or years. So that was the main part. The legislative session has kicked off down in Springfield again. There's one bill that looks like it is likely to pass that makes some changes. A lot of it is cleaning up old, redundant legislative language, but it's around teacher and school evaluations and how to incorporate student performance into that. Also allows school districts to use metrics that were previously only allowed to be used by very large districts such as Chicago. So it opens that up for other schools if they want to do so, doesn't mandate it. And it also looks like there is some progress on the de-emphasis on school buildings as polling places. Not necessarily going to be wholly de-emphasizing them, but making that a priority and then also mandating the collection of data for the number of voters who do use school buildings if they are used as polling places, so that in the future, if, for example, we learn Devonshire Elementary, 2,000 people came to vote there, it's probably valuable to continue to use it. If 2 came to vote there, maybe not so much. And so trying to make sure that there's actual measurable data on how those school buildings are being used and to effectively use the resources we have in our community and not either knee-jerk use schools no matter what, or pull the rug out if that's proving to be a really effective way to drive voter participation. So both the meeting and what's happening down in Springfield the meeting was helpful, and what's happening in Springfield seemed positive. So don't know if anyone has any questions, but that's what I got.
Thank you very much, Jeff.
And thank you for letting me go in front of Noel this time instead of having to follow the happy stories.
Yeah, you've been a really happy report, so.
Next month's double feature.
Double feature.
All right, moving on to our 2025-26 staffing needs.
So historically, each February at the board meeting, the administration and the board organize an overview of anticipated staffing needs for the following year. We are keeping with that tradition. Any formal action on any of these would occur in March as it relates to particularly certified staff and classified staff. So I do want to go back in time a little bit to last year. At the February 2024 meeting, there were 3 positions that were emphasized for attention. They were the MTSS specialists. At that time, we had 5 roles for that, 5 full-time employees. There was the possibility of a bilingual Arabic teacher needed, and these were all, again, needed for this year, or we're considering for this year. And then there was the addition of an ESL specialist, which at that time was just 1, and has since been increased to 2. And the bilingual Arabic numbers reviewed that did not get added this year. The MTSS teachers were funded through ESSER funds that were provided federally during COVID-19 COVID-19 pandemic for those 4 years. Those funds have since been used up. So the board last year in February approved the use of board funds to extend the MTSS roles for 1 additional year, which is this current year, 24-25. We have had some increases in staffing. We're currently at 313 staff total. But we have had some fluctuation in our buildings as it relates to student enrollment. Devonshire is an example, has experienced some fluctuation in an increase, going from 277 students to 403. Highland from 364 to 295. Stenson 357 to 341. Old Orchard Junior High 610 to 583. And I'm looking just in the last 5 years as it relates to when ESSER funds were in play. This year, the administration organized a new model and protocol in which the team members here from the ESC went out and met with each school leader. We asked for their input, their advocacy, their suggestions, their feedback, not all of which was able to be honored in some of these recommendations, but it was certainly listened to and weighed out in the decision making. Our focus was on trying to gather data, both qualitative and quantitative. We wanted to hear input, of course, and eventually align resources in a way where we can optimize our staffing so that it's sustainable. 3 big items came up for focus next year. Number 1 is growing enrollment at Devonshire. You heard it just now, there's been a 45% increase in student population in just the last 4 to 5 years. The second item was increasing needs for our students in our English language programming, as well as special education. And then our third item was varying program-specific needs. Particularly, we have some staffing items at Old Orchard Junior High which require additional attention, and that's where a lot of these recommendations for next year will exist. So everything that I'm going to walk you through in the next suggestions are really focused on equitable access for all students to high quality education. Once again, equitable access for all students to high quality education. So as a district, we have seen increases in both special ed populations as well as our English learners. We also, as shared back in September, have seen a $1.7 million increase in our budget from 2023 to 2024. That was based on salary and benefits that have increased, staffing shifts, as well as some of the items I mentioned regarding specialized services for our students, and also even some of the tuition that we provide for students in outplay scenarios. So the first item that I want to walk through as a recommendation is the MTSS roles themselves. We've reviewed this very carefully. I've been weighing this decision out since last February, and I am recommending that these 4 roles be discontinued for next year. I do want to acknowledge that we have received significant feedback and concerns from the staff regarding this decision. And I want to share a few of those points because I think they're very important for us as an administration to incorporate in some of the next steps when we plan this out. And the first that was shared was that these MTSS specialists have been instrumental in supporting our students and our teachers, not just during the COVID-19 initial tough days, but even today, with things like Tier 1 and Tier 2 interventions, and also the development of our MTSS system as a whole. The whole refinement of our MTSS process has been in many ways celebrated and attributed to these roles, and these team members have done an excellent job getting us to where we are. We also have feedback here from staff emphasizing and pointing out that the specialists play a critical role in centralizing and organizing various components of MTSS, everything from facilitation to supporting students in possible emotional crises moments, real responsiveness and support across the board as it relates to these team members at each of our schools. They also play a key role in coordinating team members, so helping to facilitate some of the PLC structures, and looking also at things like SEL needs of our students. The big piece that came up is the feasibility around how to redistribute these responsibilities to our existing team members. And that is the responsibility of the administration to figure out next. So we are absolutely going to be working with our principals, we'll be working with our assistant principals, and definitely engaging the remaining 12 instructional support team members in what that planning will look like. We are looking and considering things like data analysis with PLCs, strategy development, facilitating those PLC meetings, what needs to shift, what do we need to prioritize, what maybe do we need to emphasize less of. But we are still recommending that those additional 12 roles remain in the district. So that's 1 reading specialist, 1 math specialist, and 1 instructional coach for each of our 4 building sites across the district. So that's the MTSS piece. Again, going back to the equitable access for high quality education for all our students, the English Learner Services have been really identified as an area for us to almost triple down on additional supports. So we have currently in the district 69% of our students speaking a language other than English, 69%. 39% of our students receive EL services. That's an increase of 14% over the past 5 years alone and 25% since 2020. We've had in the last 10 years an increase from 15.5% back in 2015. Out of that, we have over 70 languages spoken. The top 5 are Spanish, Urdu, Arabic, Assyrian, and Tagalog. And additionally, of those students as a whole, 39% receive EL services, 25% also qualified for special education services, so dually qualified students. The bilingual Arabic recommendation is due to our projected numbers of students at Devonshire now reaching the necessity of us having a bilingual Arabic teacher at Devonshire, so that's a recommended 1.0 FTE. We have program-based needs at Old Orchard. These include things like ESL AB, Gen Ed Plus ELA, and Sheltered Math. And then the expansion and review of our ESL specialists, which we currently have 2. If you recall from last year's February, there was 1. This year another was added. And we would like to recommend that 2 additional FTE be allocated to round out and have 1 dedicated ESL specialist per building. The thought here is with the growth in the EL population, we want to make sure that our funds are following and getting to our students' needs. With special education, we also have seen an increase in demand, so we're recommending an addition of 2 special education teaching positions. And again, that is focused on providing individualized and supportive education for all our students. So I'm going to pause there. That's the staffing recommendation. Field any questions, any wonderings you have about any of those recommendations.
Scott, I did have one question. You touched on it, but in the letter that you received from some of the staff, one of the points that they seem to emphasize was their concern about the removal of the positions prior to the development of the plan to prioritize and support the work of the individual teams. And I was just wondering if you could go into a little bit more detail about why it's being done in that order and what steps you expect to
it's a
be
great
able to
question.
take.
So we're I wouldn't say we're ahead of schedule, but we're certainly not behind in any way. So we wanted this decision to be brought forth and for staff to be notified in advance for full transparency so that we can work together over the next several weeks and months to figure out what needs to shift based on our roles and responsibilities in the schools, both from a leadership lens and then also from a practitioner lens for the roles in the building. So we want to really engage the existing team members to see, where the priorities need to be developed or focused in more, or like I said earlier, just less emphasis maybe in area 2. So I think the timing is next for that. We've already weighed out some considerations that we have on how we can do that work, but we want to engage the existing team members. They know best on what's been working and what we can improve. So I think that is a little bit of the reason for that sequence, if you will.
Thank you.
Dr. Burns, how have you responded? This came today, I think, this memo.
Yes.
And your response was sent today before the meeting. And so I'm just curious as to the more formalized statement of concern. Is this the first time kind of in writing that you're seeing these, I think I counted like a 5-point statement of concern? Or have you been, in an ongoing way, kind of talking to folks about this so that it's, not a surprise? I'm just curious about the timing of their letter.
Yeah, I mean, I think to answer that question, yes, this is the first formal letter I've received. I mean, feedback has been shared throughout this decision making. I mean, I've been weighing this out since sitting here in the audience in February of last year. And it's not a decision that's easy to make, and no one wants to make it. These roles are great, the team members are exceptional, and the focus here is on, again, how can we maximize our resources to align to our students' needs? Would it be great to have these roles along with the 8 additional staff that we're recommending? Absolutely. That's an excessive amount of funding for us to have for a district of our size. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't take full advantage of it and do amazing work, but we have had some additional spending come up, as mentioned, just in the last year of our budget comparisons. It was somewhat natural in terms of its increase. So we have to be mindful of what's sustainable. The addition of these positions for another year outside of ESSER funds was a bit of a stretch in itself. It was great, and they're, like I said, doing amazing work. But it's a very difficult decision to make that needs to be analyzed further as it relates to the student needs. So I try to look at it in terms of, are we listening to the feedback? Absolutely, 100%. It is not being ignored in any way. In fact, it's helpful in terms of planning the next steps around what needs to happen. How will we restructure PLCs? What will those meetings look like? Who's facilitating what? When is data being analyzed and by whom? Those are all good questions that we're already thinking through and trying to figure out. The instructional support team also meets here as a whole from across the district, so all those team members come together, and I think those collaborative opportunities are good next steps to help look at this and problem solve together versus a top-down decision that maybe won't be what's best for students.
I guess one of the reasons I was asking about the timing is, there was a concerted effort and decision to take the year within the district to think and talk and coalesce around this. And so I'm just curious about the date of the decision is kind of here. And just over the course of the year, was there strong opposition as you were engaging, and what the decision was to do this year was to figure out a way to make this difficult decision. So this was kind of a bye year, and I'm just curious to the extent of whether the district teachers recall or were reminded that this is exactly what we were planning to do, that the administration was planning to do this year.
Yeah, and I think it'd be a different situation if we weren't recommending additional staff. That's not what's happening. I mean, we are absolutely looking at a growing student population need that requires staffing, direct staffing aligned to those students, and that we cannot ignore. And that was a big decision element in terms of what was needed this year. If that's helpful.
Scott, not so much a question, but just to re-emphasize what you just shared. The increase in non-English speaking students is something that we've talked about in our board meetings. We talked about in the context of legislation that unfortunately did not get passed. seeking additional funds specifically to address the wave of newcomers and non-English speaking students, not just in our district, but across the community. I went back through some notes prior to this meeting. It's a topic just one town over. In 2023, at Evanston High School, they had double the number of non-English speakers in their student population in their freshman class than they did in the senior class. They had, from July through September of that year, more newcomer students join their district than the entire previous year put together. It's something that we've also seen in other neighboring districts where the increase can come almost literally overnight. And it's awful that we're forced, and you are forced, to prioritize areas of need over other acknowledged areas of need. And I appreciate the thought and the data backing the decision being made here. And I'm also wary because this isn't necessarily a point at which we need to stop. And this is a trend that could continue. And I just wanted to say that out loud in this meeting as we're discussing staffing decisions, because we don't know what the demographics of our district are going to be a year from now, 2 years from now, frankly, even a month from now. And I think I really, again, appreciate the data being gathered, and it's something that I trust we'll continue to rely on as we're making these decisions, because they're not easy ones.
And it wasn't easy for the team. I mean, we have been, names of students have been on the board as a comment I've shared with the team as it relates to how granular we've gone with these decisions as to, to what extent and to where and how to make the decision. So it has gotten to that point where we are looking at every detail that we can because no one wants to make this decision. It's not an easy one in any way. However, 39% of our students receive EL services. That is significant. That is a significant number of students that we cannot ignore as it relates to our staffing model. I think also right now we only have 2 ESL specialists, so there are likely assumptions made that it's going to be more of the same, and that may not be the case. Those roles may change in terms of focus as well as service model. So I think there's a need to be more innovative with the new roles as well. So I think that's another piece that's coming as it relates to the sequence that you asked about earlier and the how and the why. We don't have the positions yet. So the first step is to engage you as a board as well as our staff to make sure that we're being transparent, and then to refine it after that as well.
I don't want to get too much in the administrative weeds, Scott, but I'm just curious in terms of the profile of the kind of full-time FTE that we're looking to respond to the current needs, the increasingly specific needs for English learner. Is there a portfolio of a staffer that has some elements of the work that the MTSS teacher was providing and some aspects of specialization in ESL? Are those, I don't know, is that profile out there in terms of teacher education? Some folks that have a kind of combination of skill sets so that it could be an English an ESL specialist, but who might have something in their portfolio that can help still continue to bring to the table some of these needs that we continue to have with learning loss. I don't know if that's a profile of an ESL specialist to have that as well, because staying nimble with these positions I think makes a really good point that it's going to continue to shift and change, and looking for folks to fill these positions that have maybe some cross-sectional skills could be a way to keep the needs very present. And again, not getting into administrative work too much, but is that a profile that exists?
There's definitely areas of overlap. I'm thinking of things like data analysis, coaching, knowledge of interventions, but I also don't want to dilute the specificity of an ESL specific role, because the whole driver of this difficult decision is ensuring that we're aligning to the student needs. So I don't want to sand that position down too much in that regard, but there's definitely overlap in terms of responsibility areas. But it's not, the MTSS role right now is doing something very different than the ESL specialist could or would do in the future. And the staff has done a really professional, great job of ensuring that we as an administration and me as a superintendent are aware of that. We absolutely are. So I appreciate them for voicing that concern and making sure that we weigh it out and how we shape the next steps.
Thank you.
I wanna echo Jeff in that this is just a difficult position, and it's been one that's been in the hopper for a year. So I appreciate the data informed way and the consultative way that we've come to this decision and recommendation. Thank you.
On that note, we will continue to be sharing and looking at that data as well. Should this develop further as it relates to the recommendation, we'll continue to bring that data to you so that we can see how our students are doing as a result of this potential program shift. So there's more to come on that. The next item is, sorry, go ahead.
Just want to ask one more small thing, which actually isn't about the MTSS. I understand the logic there, and that it's hard, and appreciate, again, as has already been stated. I'm actually looking at the numbers of the 6 days enrollment by school, and as I remember, although this is prior to when I came onto the board, the decision had been made to change the boundaries to be able to reduce congestion at Highland, and it almost looks like there's a reversal that's happened.
Yeah.
And so I am just curious about whether that's something, that distribution is something that is perhaps in the pipeline for later, because it seems like it seems like now with the movement, initially it was doing exactly what it was supposed to do, but the jumps have been pretty substantial at Devonshire from year to year. And I'm just wondering, like, how is the school managing with that large an increase in enrollment, because that's
And do we know that that
substantial.
is, obviously that contributed, that was the goal, but do we know how much that impacted that change? Is it that?
Yeah, it's a great segue to the next item, which I'll work to answer, because this next item is definitely cause and effect as it relates to the boundary change. So the reason that on the document you're looking at the 2021 versus 24-25 is highlighted is 2021 is the year after the district went through a boundary change that impacted mainly, just for our audience, Devonshire and Highland. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen a 45% increase at Devonshire and a 19% decrease at Highland in that time. As a result, we absolutely have talked about and have looked at the potential for a demographic study down the line. But I think the trend going up is evidence alone that there is an impact from that boundary shift. I don't know at this particular time where specifically, geographically, led to that increase, but it is something we want to analyze further, because we have also the largest population of our EL students is also at Devonshire. We also, which is the next topic, have RISE with 2 sections, which is our Reaching Independence Through Support and Education, special education programming. 2 sections currently located at Devonshire and are at capacity and cannot fit those 2 sections at Devonshire. Given both programming changes as well as just the enrollment in itself, the opportunity is there for a shift of that program location from Devonshire to Highland, and that is what we would like to recommend for next year as it relates to those 2 sections at Devonshire to be located at Highland, with some fluctuation as it relates to certain students possibly who may have a homeschool at Stenson to potentially be at Stenson. I'll kind of walk you through the thinking with this. We have right now, just to give you a little bit of history, when RISE first started, my understanding in 2021 is that there were only 6 students. So if you look at the population of Devonshire, 277, with 6 students in the RISE program, that's very feasible, very doable, very approachable as it relates to a service model. We've had now 403, and the program has grown significantly in that time. We do have more space. I don't want to say necessarily a great amount of space, but definitely more space available next year anticipated at Highland, in which we can comfortably locate the program there, as well as keep the 2 sections at Stinson, and we would be increasing from 1 section to 2 sections at Old Orchard. Obviously, we would want to be communicating this as a next step with any impacted families, making sure they're aware, talking to them about individual placement and different student needs should they exist. That would be the next step, but of course, needed to bring it here first for your awareness.
Would that change the enrollment numbers, or they students enroll in a specific their neighborhood school and then get placed into RISE?
That is a good question. When we do enrollment, it's serving school as well as homeschool. I'd have to look further to see if those students would show up as being enrolled in a serving school or a homeschool. We can follow up for that. The section size is around 19 students, if I'm correct, at Devonshire, 10 and 9. So again, there may be some fluctuation. It doesn't necessarily mean that 19 students would be going from Devonshire to Highland. It may actually, there may be some transition opportunities for students at Stinson whose homeschool might be Highland. So there may be a bit of an opportunity, if you will, for students to shift to a homeschool that otherwise hadn't been at it. I think I captured that accurately. Okay, thank you. Again, not an easy decision to make, but very difficult to ignore Devonshire's capacity. We've gotten really creative with recent construction. We're able to get ahead of this. Principal Ritz has been an advocate and has been helpful, along with Ernie Nelson and his team. They were able to actually split rooms physically into 2 in a couple of spaces when the summer construction was just starting. That was great. That was definitely helpful, but it was admittedly a bit of a Band-Aid. And helped us get smaller intervention-related spaces or smaller learning environments, if you will. We can't continue to do that. It's not sustainable. Any questions at all?
I have one last one.
Sure.
For me, others may have other ones. Do you anticipate with what's been going on with the enrollment numbers that there may be some challenges with continuing to provide space for NTDSE satellite classrooms?
That's a great question. It's definitely something we've talked about. We've engaged NTDSE to discuss how to potentially utilize the current ECC, our early childhood space. Admittedly, that space is not the most conducive to an integrated setting, so that has created a little bit of less of an opportunity with those classrooms. It is something we're considering and looking at. Currently, we do have NTDSE sections at Highland. We don't know just yet whether or not that'll be an issue, but it's definitely something we're weighing out. And we've been in direct communication with NTDSE on that as well. Anything else?
Next steps?
So next steps on this item involve communication to families, making them aware of this potential update, which would be just an initial communication, followed then by individual placement information that would be coming before spring break to help families prepare and be aware of the shift. And if we need to in certain spaces, of course, we'll do things like orientation opportunities, getting students into the building, etc., which is typical in every new school year anyway. So that is the last of the programmatic updates as it relates to staffing needs for next year.
Thank you. Alright. We move on to our action items. Next item of business is the approval of the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $6,125,000 general obligation limited tax school bonds, Series 2025 for working cash funds. May I have a motion?
I move to approve the resolution providing for the issue of not to exceed $6,125,000 general obligation limited tax school bonds, Series 2025 for working cash fund.
Second.
Who wants to take this one?
I can take it. We're at the final step. While not related to the last items, it is a helpful item. We are looking to obviously issue this working cash fund to help us with some of the spending as it relates to capital improvements, which eventually does help with things like staffing as well. So this is the final step in the process. Elizabeth Hennessy's here from Raymond and James. She's been patiently waiting and taking notes during the Avid session. Cornell notes. So there's really not a whole lot more to this, but I'm sure she can answer any questions if you have them as it relates to this process. This is the final step in that board engagement piece.
The only question that I had is I've seen a lot of, concern about change in the markets, volatility in the economy. Has any of what's happened over the last 6 weeks changed the broad recommendations of what you presented at our previous meetings?
No, we're really within a range of interest rates. We do bounce up and down. The CPI last week came in a little hotter than expected, so that pushed rates up, but they came back down at the end of last week. And so I think we're mostly stable within a range. So we'll be looking at rates similar to what we have presented to the board, something under 4%.
Thank you.
Ruffner,
Yes.
Sturbins,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bill Jordan,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Lonegro.
Yes.
Thank you. Alright. There were 3 requests and or responses for information under the Freedom of Information Act during the period January 11th through February 13th, 2025. On January 2nd, the district received a commercial request from Sherry Reed from Data Acquisition Specialists requesting purchase order and vendor information. Response was sent on January 29th. On January 15th, the district received a request from Sheila Norman from Illinois Retired Teachers Association requesting the name and email addresses of any certified staff, teachers, administrators, nurses, counselors, etc. A response was sent on January 16th. And on January 30th, the district received a commercial request from Matt Stockwell from the data branch requesting a spreadsheet containing all purchase orders from January 1st, 2020 to the present day. That response is pending. Our next item of business is entering into the closed session of the board. May I have a motion?
I move to enter into closed session for the following items: security procedures, school building safety and security, and the use of personnel and equipment to respond to an actual, a threatened, or a reasonable potential danger to the safety of employees, students, staff, the public, or public property pursuant to 5 ILCS 122C8, and student disciplinary cases pursuant to 5 ILCS 122C9.
Second.
Sturbins,
Yes.
Sullivan,
Yes.
Bill Jordan,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Lonegro,
Yes.
Ruffner.
Yes. Thank you. We'll take 5 minutes before we